Hey everybody, welcome to Board Online, Board Offline. Today we are finally starting part 3 of our Dungeon Universalis How to Play series. This video will be covering the turn, which is going to be essentially the hero's turn. If you haven't checked out part 1 and part 2, be sure to go look at those. And then of course this series is going to be quite the long series. It will either be 8 or 9 parts depending on whether or not I end up covering the advanced rules in the end. During the hero's turn, each character must complete a recovery phase and an actions and move phase. The recovery phase generally is pretty quick. If the hero happens to be stunned currently for any reason, they would roll a d6. On a 4 or better, they would have recovered from the stun. On a 3 or less, as you see here, then they are still stunned. We'll cover what being stunned means along with other conditions in the combat video. If the character starts the turn knocked down, they will be able to rise automatically back to their feet. However, if they're knocked down at the beginning of their turn and they are adjacent to an enemy, they must pass an agility test in order to rise. Now, if this hero had suffered the knockdown condition in their previous activation, in other words, they were not knocked down after their previous activation during maybe a enemy turn or something like that, but during their previous activation they had been knocked down, then they would actually go ahead and pass an agility test automatically. Whether they pass the agility test automatically or if they pass it through the normal test rules, they are stunned when they rise, again, if an enemy is next to them. After the recovery phase, which, like I said, is fairly quick, hero moves into the actions and moves phase, and each hero may perform one action and one move in any order that they wish. Heroes also are allowed to take a quick action at no cost, and if they'd like to take a second quick action, they can replace their normal action with that second quick action. Before we talk about actions, let's discuss movement. A character can move as many spaces as indicated by their movement attribute. In the case of Borgren here, we can move 5 spaces. It's important to note that the rules state clearly that after you have completed your move, so let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once you have completed your move, which I would say the move is completed once I have taken my hand off of my piece, at that point the move is final and you cannot take it back. Often when I'm playing a game, I will say that a move or any sort of thing that has occurred in the game can be taken back if no new information has been gained in the course of taking that action or making that move. However, the game is, the rules here are very specific that once a move has been made, it cannot be taken back. It should be noted that a hero in Dungeon Universalis can move orthogonally, but they can also move diagonally. However, there is an important distinction with diagonal movement. If the trajectory of that move is partially obstructed by a wall or corner of an obstacle, then it can't be made. So for instance, I could move diagonally here. However, moving diagonally from this space to this space is partially obstructed by this wall, and so I'd have to move out and then I can move up. Another example would be if I move here, I cannot then move into this space because it's partially obstructed by these boxes, and so I'd have to move around like that. The same goes for moving upstairs. I can move here and then I would not be able to move up the stairs like that. I actually have to go up the stairs like that instead. And over here, could not move diagonally onto the stairs like that. If a player needs to determine a distance in squares from a certain point, so for instance, let's say maybe this pile of treasure was trapped and was going to cause an area of effect when it was set off, the player can calculate the distance as if it were movement. So let's say, for instance, that this is not impassable, this is just an obstacle that can be climbed over if necessary. Then you would see here that this is 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces away from our hero. However, if instead this were something like this, that is completely impassable, then we would have to count it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces away from the hero. Facing plays an important role in Dungeon Universalis, and characters can change their facing at any time during their activation. So if our hero moved up here and they finished their movement, maybe they even did an action at this point, and then they wanted to change their facing before they ended their activation, that would be allowed. It should be noted that in order to perform an offensive action against an enemy, they must be facing the opponent they intend to attack. Once a hero attacks an enemy, if they end their activation adjacent to that enemy, they must be facing that enemy. Regardless, it should be noted that changing a facing or turning your character like this, that in and of itself is not considered movement. It should also be noted that the requirement to face the enemy you attacked only matters if you are adjacent to the enemy. So let's say that Borgren here attacked this enemy, and then as part of the attack or after the attack, however the actions shake out, he pushed the enemy away. Now, Borgren could choose to face any direction he wants at the end of his turn, since he's no longer adjacent to that enemy. The heights or elevations of objects in Dungeon Universalis are also very important. For instance, let's say that at this point on the stairs, this is a height of 1 above the ground level, and this is a height of 2 above ground level. The height of objects plays a very important role in Dungeon Universalis as well. Let's say that this enemy was standing on top of these boxes. If the scenario indicated these boxes were a height of 1 above ground level, then they are considered adjacent right now. However, if these boxes were a height of 2 above ground level, they would no longer be considered adjacent to each other, as anytime the height difference between where one character is and where the other character is more than 1, there is no adjacency. Again, a height of 1 level higher, they are still adjacent. 2 or more, they are not adjacent. Also, 2 characters are not considered adjacent if there's an impassable obstacle between them, such as a wall. For the purposes of actions and movements, a character located on stairs is not considered adjacent to others located outside of the stairs unless they are standing in the access point for the stairs, as Borgren is here, or if the characters are huge. It should be noted that it's only possible to enter stairs from the specific access point to it, in this case right here, just like that. So again, just because the stairs rules can be a little hard to wrap your head around, I think initially, at least they were for me, right now, Borgren is adjacent to this enemy, but cannot attack the enemy, and movement is not affected by the enemy. If this enemy were huge, then it could attack Borgren, and Borgren could attack it. But since the enemy is not huge, neither can attack the other, and neither are affected by the other for movement purposes, even though they are considered adjacent. If the enemy were here, however, it's now in the entrance space for the stairs, and Borgren is next to that space as well, so they are adjacent, and they can attack, and they are affected by each other for movement purposes. It's also important to note that when you are advancing up ascending stairs, every step you take up ascending stairs costs 1 additional point of movement. It's the equivalent of climbing up 1 additional level, which we have not discussed, but keep in mind that's what's happening here. It should be noted also that this does not apply to descending stairs, and since you often will be delving deeper into the dungeon, many of the stairs you're going to run into will be descending. Also, if a character comes across vertical ladders, they can climb or descend the ladder as if making normal movement. Running's not allowed though, and the entire length of the ladder is considered difficult terrain. We'll discuss difficult terrain in more detail in just a little bit in this video. It should be noted that doors are considered accesses to the different elements of the map and do not actually occupy any squares. So Borgren could be right here, for instance. And in fact, in order for Borgren to interact with this door, he must be adjacent to it, and to be adjacent to it means to be in one of these squares here, or of course, if you were on this side of it, to be in this square or this square. It should also be noted that being adjacent to the door would count if you are here, as you are adjacent to the wall the door is connected to, and essentially diagonally adjacent like that. So, not adjacent, adjacent, and adjacent. A hero cannot move through a square occupied by an enemy. They also cannot move through a square occupied by an impassable obstacle. And they cannot move through a square occupied by another hero who is engaged in combat. However, if that hero is not engaged in combat, now they can move through that square. However, it will cost one additional movement to do so. Also, they can never finish their movement in a square occupied by another hero. Characters can also move onto spaces that contain furniture, as long as they spend one extra movement point and the furniture is shorter than they are. Climbing onto furniture or elevated positions can be important for line of sight, as well as melee. If most of a square is occupied by a wall, or if it's occupied by any other type of impassable obstacle, then the entire square is considered impassable. Now, an important distinction here is these two squares, these two, and these two are not impassable. It's considered that the wall only takes up about half of those squares, and so they actually are able to be occupied by a character. Similarly, on this tile, these squares are all possible to be occupied. It also should be noted that no character can freely move through any space occupied by an object that is equal to or greater in height than that character. So let's say that these boxes here were the same height as our hero. The hero could not move through them unless he climbed on top of them by using one additional movement. Let's say for the scenario we're in, this 4 square area is considered some sort of sand trap and is difficult terrain. Each square of difficult terrain that a character moves into costs them 1 additional movement point. Additionally, a character placed in difficult terrain gets a -1 penalty to their combat skill, shooting skill, casting, and dispelling spells. There will be areas with water so deep that it will require swimming instead of simply regarding it as difficult terrain. When in deep water, only adjacent enemies can fight, and they can only fight using daggers or natural weapons such as claws, fangs, horns, tentacles, etc. Any non-aquatic creatures will get a -1 penalty to their combat skill also. Also, casting spells, dispelling, or shooting is not allowed in deep waters. Characters in deep water have light cover against attacks made from outside the water. They also ignore the melee range of all enemies outside the water, and vice versa. If a character wants to swim forward, he will be able to advance a number of spaces equal to his agility attribute. In the case of Borgren here, his agility is 3, and so he can move forward 3 spaces. However, he would have an extra penalty of -1 if wearing heavy armor, and so he would have only been able to move 2 spaces if he were wearing heavy armor right now. If their agility is negative, at the end of their activation, they will suffer 3 damage dice against their natural armor. In addition, they will have to roll 2d6 at the start of their activation if they declare they want to advance by swimming. On a double 1, the character will not advance at all. On a double 6, they'll be able to advance 1 extra space. Characters swimming at any time during their turn must use agility for their entire movement, even if they manage to get out of the water. When a large or huge creature moves, you will select one of the 4 spaces at its base, and then based on that space, move it as if it were an average size creature. It has all the same normal movement rules, diagonal movement is allowed, etc. However, when one of these creatures moves, it must end its movement so that All 4 squares are free of obstacles and other characters. However, it could end its movement so that it is on an obstructed space like this, meaning that we have a 1-space door and it has its 4 squares on either side of that door. It could also end its movement in an area where the corridor space is smaller than its base, like this. In cases like this, it will be regarded as being on difficult terrain. Also, when in a corridor where the total amount of space is smaller than their base, at any time during their movement, they will not be able to run during that movement. Now let's discuss the various actions in the game. Each hero can perform 1 action during their turn, and as a general rule, an action cannot be performed if the hero is within melee range or is adjacent to an enemy. Also, a number of actions are considered exploratory actions. We'll specify that as we discuss the actions. And only heroes can perform exploratory actions unless otherwise noted. Also, no exploratory actions can be performed during combat turns except revealing a new section and opening unexplored doors. The first action we'll discuss is revealing a new section. These are exploration arrows, and revealing a new section is an exploratory action. If a hero is standing on an exploration arrow, they can declare they want to reveal the new section. At that point, the new section is revealed, which will also include any creatures and elements found in that section. At that point, the exploration arrows are also removed from the board. Opening an unexplored door is an exploratory action. If a character is adjacent to a closed door that has not been previously opened during the game, they can decide to open it. At this point, the section that door is connected to will be revealed. If a character is adjacent to an unopened door that has not previously been opened during the game, they can decide to open it, at which point the section that is connected will be revealed. If, in trying to open the closed door, the hero discovers that the door cannot be opened for any reason, whether it's a trap, a lock, a riddle, etc., that does not count as them spending an action. So, speaking of locked doors, opening a locked door is an exploratory action. When a hero declares they wish to open a door or access, and the quest sheet or dark player card indicates the door is locked, this or another hero adjacent to the door will be able to devote 1 action to try to open it by passing a dexterity check. It's important to note that you only have a single attempt to do this. Success means the door will open, and failure means the door now can only be opened by breaking it down. Opening a chest is an exploratory action, and a hero adjacent to the chest can devote 1 action to perform a dexterity test in order to open it and get the loot inside. Again, the group will have only 1 attempt to do so. If they fail, the chest can only be opened by breaking it. If they succeed, the chest will be opened, and they will draw a card from the treasure deck to find out what is inside. These objects found inside can immediately be distributed among the group of heroes. So for instance, you might find 10 coins and 1 random magic object. Sometimes opening a chest or a door may involve a riddle. This normally will require an exploratory action. Riddles are solved by successfully passing an intelligence test. As has been a recurring theme, the group will only have 1 attempt to succeed this test. Success means that the chest or door will be opened. Failure, on the other hand, means that the door can only be opened by breaking it. If it's a chest, it cannot be opened or broken in any way during the quest. Now, we've mentioned repeatedly the ability to break open doors, chests, and other objects. Characters and creatures both may use an action to hit a door, chest, or adjacent object. Doors and chests may only be hit after they have been tried to be opened without violence. No opposed roll is required to hit these elements, as they will be hit automatically. The damage dice are rolled the usual way. If you choose to hit an object like this, you do need to place a noise marker next to it and keep track of how many times the heroes have hit it with a die. Each turn a hero hits it, simply roll the die up 1. In their next encounter, their enemies will get a +1 bonus to their initiative roll for each turn in which the heroes have hit that particular element. The number of actual hits does not matter. Generally speaking, a door will have 5 armor and 5 vitality. A reinforced door will have 6 armor and 6 vitality. A chest will have 5 armor and 5 vitality. And then any other element that you might be hitting will be determined by the quest sheet for its armor and vitality. If a door is broken open, then immediately reveal the area behind it and anything included in that area. And keep in mind that breaking a door open means that it cannot be closed again. So you may want to mark it some way or actually remove it and replace it with a floor tile. But you still would probably want to remember that that was a door at one point. But whatever you need to do to make it clear to yourself, you cannot close that door. Once a chest has been broken open, you will draw a treasure card from the deck as usual. And it should be noted that elements such as chests, walls, or doors will always be regarded as heavy armored by any weapons and spells used against them. It also should be noted that combat skills cannot be applied when hitting these types of items. A character may decide to run during their turn. To run, take 2d6 and roll them, and then add the result to your normal movement ability. So normally, Borgren here can run or can walk 5 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now he's rolled a 7. However, you also can only add an amount equal to your normal movement. So in other words, at best you can double your normal movement. So even though he rolled a 7, he can move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more spaces. It should also be noted that if you roll double 1s, then you actually have your normal movement. Also, on a turn where the character is running, if they are required to take a perception test, they will do so with a -2 penalty. It's also important to realize that running must be declared prior to beginning your move. You don't get to move 5 and then declare, okay, actually I'm running, and then roll, and then continue your movement. If a character needs to move across a pit or a cliff, or even jump to a lower floor, they must perform a great jump. This will require an agility test and can occur over up to 3 squares wide. In this case, of course, we have a 1 square wide pit. You are allowed to interrupt your movement to do the jump and then continue your movement afterwards. It's important to realize that the total distance of the spaces the character will be moving, including the jump, cannot exceed their movement attribute. So, if Borgren started here, and then he moved 4 spaces, after the jump he would have moved a total of 6 spaces, and so he would not be able to take the jump now. But, on the other hand, if he had started here, and he moved 3 spaces, well then after this jump he would have moved 5 total, and so this would be a time where he could make the jump. It's possible to get some negative modifiers for its agility test. For instance, if the jump is occurring over more than a single square, so if for some reason Borgren was going to jump across this pit here, it's more than 1 square, and so he will receive a -1 penalty. Also, if Borgren were standing adjacent to an enemy when he made the jump, he would receive a -1 penalty. It's also important to note that there must be an empty square on the other side of the pit or obstacle that they're jumping across in order for them to land safely. If there's not, then they cannot make the jump. It's also important to note that there must be a valid empty space on the other side of the jump for them to land on. If they succeed, then they are placed on a space on the other side of the jump. If there is no empty square, but that's because there are either allies or enemies on the other side of the jump, then as long as they have succeeded, they can actually still conduct the jump by pushing back a character in one of the spaces on the other side. If the character fails the jump, then their activation is over and they suffer a fall, and we'll discuss falls near the end of this video. If your character does fail the test and there is an ally on the other side of the jump, the side where the character was attempting to jump, if that ally also has a rope in their inventory, they can immediately perform a strength test to help you conduct the jump. This can be done even if the helping character has already been activated this turn. If the character to be helped is large, then there will be a -1 to the strength test. And if there is an enemy adjacent to the character with the rope, there will be a -1 to the strength test. However, if the strength test is successful, then now the jump is successful. And if it fails, then the results are the same as previous. The activation of the character conducting the jump ends and they suffer a fall. If a character is at the bottom of a pit after failing a jump, they can climb out of it. In this case, they have to pass an agility test again. They will receive a -1 penalty to the agility test if there is an enemy adjacent to the pit. However, if they succeed the agility test, then the upper end of the pit has been reached, ending the activation in a free square adjacent to the pit. Just as with a jump, if the squares adjacent to the pit are occupied by allies or enemies, the character still can climb out, pushing one of those characters back so they can occupy the free space. If the character fails the agility test, then they will remain at the bottom of the pit and their activation ends. Just as with the jumping, a character, or ally I should say, next to the pit who has a rope can assist. If this character failed their agility test to climb out, this character with a rope can then conduct a strength test to pull them out of the pit. As before, if the character they're helping is large, then they receive a -1 penalty, and if there's an enemy next to the character with the rope, they receive a -1 penalty. Searching for a secret door is an exploratory action. This action cannot be combined with a move, so if the character moves during their turn, they cannot search for a secret door. A character can declare that they are searching for a secret door regardless of where they are in the section. So they don't have to be adjacent to a wall. They can be anywhere in this section. However, this section is the one that they have to be searching for the secret door in. They would, if they wanted to search in this hallway, for instance, they would need to go down into this hallway to search for a secret door in the hallway. To search for a secret door successfully, they must pass a perception test. Success, if there is a hidden secret door in that section, the dark player will then place the secret door in its appropriate location. At this point, the secret door is treated as a normal door and may be opened in the usual manner. However, since it is a normal door, this also means the dark player may end up adding obstacles or traps or anything like that, just as they can with any other door. On the other hand, if the character fails the perception check, then nothing happens. If a character is in a room, it's important to note that it's a room, not a corridor. So this action does not work in a corridor. But if the character is in a room, they can conduct the exploratory action of searching a room. The room must not have been previously examined for this same purpose, and this action can be conducted from anywhere within the room. Again, they will need to conduct a perception test, and this will be the one and only attempt they have to search the room. It should be noted this is for the entire group. A group can only search a room one time. On a success, they will find objects in the room worth 1d3 plus 1 of coins. So in this case, the objects are worth 4 coins. During the perception check, if they received double sixes, then instead of calculating the number of coins found, they will draw a card from the treasure deck. If during the perception test they roll double sixes, then rather than calculating the number of coin value found, they will instead draw a card from the treasure deck. It should be noted that 2d6s will not have this effect if the character searching has a negative perception attribute. And of course, if the perception test is failed, then simply nothing happens. Also, once the main room of a scenario is found, then no previously explored rooms can be searched. Characters can search or interact with elements they are adjacent to, such as furniture, etc., to resolve its effects. So they could search a cupboard, drink from a fountain, pray before an altar, that sort of thing. The card for that specific element will be read and its effects resolved. Just as with rooms, each element can be searched only once. Even if the heroes return to a scenario for a second time, those elements that were searched previously will be regarded as already searched and their effects will remain the same. Once the main room or section has been discovered, it will not be possible to search elements previously revealed. Searching or interacting with elements is an exploratory effect. A character may equip armor or take armor off as an action. This cannot be combined with a move in the same turn. Specifically, this only refers to armor that covers the body, not elements such as shields or helmets. These are manipulated the same way as other objects, which we'll talk about during the quick actions section of this video. Deactivating traps is an exploratory action. This action can be performed after some of the characters have detected a trap. So, for instance, if a trap were detected inside of this library. If a trap is dormant, such as inside of a chest or a door or inside the library, a hero adjacent to that element or square may disarm it by passing a dexterity test. If double sixes had been rolled when detecting the trap in the first place, then the test to disable the trap would receive a +1. On a success, the trap is disabled, the card is discarded. However, the door or chest or furniture is still not considered open. On a failure, the trap will be activated and the effects described on this card will occur. And again, the door or chest or furniture is still not open. After finishing combat, and always before a new section is revealed, one hero can spend an exploratory action to search the corpses of their enemies. This does not require being adjacent to an enemy, and any character that has taken part in a turn of combat with these enemies simply has to declare they want to carry out this action. So, for instance, if this were the enemy that Borgren had killed during combat, he would roll 1d6 for each eliminated enemy, and for each of those rolls that resulted in a 4 or better, he would receive 1 coin. If this had been an elite level enemy, he would roll 2d6, and if there were a champion level enemy, he would roll as many d6 as that enemy's strength or intelligence, whichever is higher. In addition to receiving a coin for every result of 4 or better, if they receive at least 2 sixes, then they receive a random common object. 3 sixes result in a random special object. 4 sixes result in a random common object and random special object. And 5 or more sixes result in a random magic object. To be clear, not a relic. If the hero is searching corpses after defeating the quest leader, they will always find the magic objects the quest leader was carrying, if they were carrying any. If the hero happens to be unarmed and none of his allies have any weapons to provide him, and that means not weapons they don't want to provide him, but they literally have no weapons to provide him, then when he is searching corpses, he can also take one non-magic weapon used by the last enemy killed. However, he will have a -1 penalty to his combat or shooting skills while using that weapon, and that weapon cannot be sold. It's also important that to do this, the enemy in question must be the same size as the character taking the weapon. And if a hero has been knocked out the heroes that are conscious can search that hero and take those belongings. Generally speaking, there is always enough light in the sections to be able to see. However, there are dark player cards that can affect visibility. Characters can use objects such as lanterns that are a light source to avoid the effects of darkness and complete darkness. These tokens can be used to indicate where the source of the light is coming from. If the player is holding the source of the light, then they don't need this marker, but if they place the source of the light down somewhere, that's when this marker will come into play. A character can use an action to move a furniture item to an adjacent square, like this. The character must be adjacent to the furniture to move it, and the character must be the same height or taller than the furniture he is trying to move. To move it, he will need to pass a strength test. Furniture can be moved multiple times using multiple actions, and it can also be broken and is considered to have an armor of 5, vitality of 5. As an action, characters can build a footbridge if they are on opposite ends of a pit or cliff. One of the characters must immediately spend 1 pickaxe and 1 rope. These cannot be reused. After doing so, a footbridge is placed like this. An action can also be spent to destroy a footbridge from a square adjacent to one of its ends. Footbridges are regarded as difficult terrain, and each time a large creature crosses a footbridge, it must roll 1d6. On a result of a 1, the footbridge collapses, and the creature will fall with it. Huge creatures cannot step on a footbridge or will automatically destroy it under their weight and fall with it. Throughout the course of the game, heroes will encounter NPCs. Sometimes it may be possible through a card effect or narrative situation to persuade an NPC. Persuasion can be done through intelligence or through fear. If the character uses Persuade Intelligence, they must be adjacent to the NPC. They'll roll 2d6, as will the NPC. The NPC is always considered to have an intelligence attribute of 3, and so in this case, 10 plus 5 is 15, while the NPC rolled a 9 plus 3 is 12, so Borgren would have successfully persuaded through intelligence the NPC. The hero will receive a -1 penalty to their roll if they are trying to persuade a character of an opposite alignment of their own, so good trying to persuade evil or vice versa. The hero will receive a +1 modifier if they are trying to persuade a character of the same race, so in this case, if he were trying to persuade another dwarf. A hero can only make 1 persuasion roll per NPC, and if he fails, other heroes are allowed to try to do it as well. However, those heroes will receive a -1 penalty to their roll for each previously made attempt. If the hero rolls a blunder, double ones, when trying to persuade, all subsequent attempts against the same NPC by himself or his allies will fail, and so should not be attempted. As I mentioned, it's also possible to persuade through fear. In this case, the hero must be adjacent, just as with the intelligence persuasion. And just as with the intelligence persuasion, a card or narrative situation will allow the hero to perform an opposed persuasion through fear, meaning a strength check. So again, both the NPC and the hero roll 2d6. Unless otherwise noted, the NPC character will use their courage attribute and will be considered to have a courage attribute of 3. So in this case, 6 plus 3 is 9, whereas over here we have 7 plus 3 is 10, and so Borgren has successfully intimidated the target. For a persuasion through fear, only a single attempt for the entire group is allowed per NPC. There are certain skills that allow you to identify the powers of magic weapons or potions. If the heroes find a magic object, a relic, or a potion, they will generally not know what its effects are unless one of them has the correct skill and passes an intelligence test. They also can pay for the services of an expert in a settlement. As long as the heroes are unaware of the magic attributes of, let's say, a weapon, So for instance, maybe a magic broadsword, they can still use it as a regular broadsword. Because the object is magical, even though they don't understand the nature of its magic yet, if they have to roll a breaking roll and they fail, they will be allowed to re-roll that breaking roll. Then, whenever they finally have discovered what the broadsword's magic capabilities are, they will be able to use it to its full potential. When a hero finds an unidentified potion, they will retrieve the unidentified potion card from the deck, and they will not be able to use that potion. When the opportunity comes to identify the potion, the hero will roll 1d6 per potion, and the result will let them know what the potion is. Indicated on the card here, so in the case of a 1, it's poison, 2 is dexterity, 3 heroic, 4 strength, 5 mana, and 6 healing. If there are no cards left in the deck for that type of potion, then the potion is considered to have no effect at all and will be discarded from the game. Additional actions that we haven't covered but will be covered later are melee attacks, ranged attacks, and casting spells. These will all be covered in the next video of this series. Also, there may be additional attribute tests the character can perform, and these generally will cost an action as well. It's also very important to realize when performing any exploratory actions that if double ones are rolled, this helps the dark player, as it gives the dark player reserve point budget an additional 1 point. Now let's discuss quick actions. Each character can perform one quick action during their activation. This can be carried out before, during, or after a character's movement. And as a reminder, you can also replace your normal action with a second quick action. Generally speaking, a quick action cannot be performed when within an enemy's melee range or while adjacent to an enemy. An example of the most common quick actions are giving an item to an adjacent companion. It should be noted, though, that an item cannot be used by two characters in the same turn. A character can also leave or pick up an item as they're moving, and they can place it in the space they're in or an adjacent space. Activating a lever is a quick action. Opening or closing a door is a quick action, provided it is to a room or corridor or section that has already been explored, meaning that that door has already been opened once during the game. Players can equip objects to their hands by interchanging them with what is in their backpack. They could equip a helm also. Drinking a potion is a quick action, and drawing or switching your weapons is a quick action. So you could swap out weapons from your backpack. This particular quick action, drawing or switching weapons, can be used while adjacent to an enemy or within an enemy's melee range. Finally, let's discuss falls. In the event of a fall due to a failed test while performing a great jump or any other event, the character will fall onto the square of the pit that he was pushed or on the one that was closest to where he intended to jump. The character will become stunned and will take 1 damage die against their natural armor for each point of height they fell. So, assuming this pit is just 1 height deep, then 3. After resolving the damage, the character's activation ends. I will also point out that generally speaking, a pit is going to be much deeper than 1 point of height. Commonly, you may end up rolling 4 dice when falling into a pit. If 2 enemy characters end up falling into a pit, they will not fight each other in the bottom of the pit, as they will be too preoccupied trying to get out. Characters outside of the pit will never be able to use melee attacks to attack their enemies in the pit, but they can use spells or shoot at them. However, characters in the pit are considered to be behind heavy cover, but if the person shooting at them or casting the spell is adjacent to them, then they can shoot and cast spells with no obstacles or restrictions. And there you go. That's everything you need to know for the turn in Dungeon Universalis. That is the end of part 3 of our How to Play series. Part 4 will be covering combat and magic. Very much looking forward to getting involved in that one. Be sure to come back for that. Also, be sure to come back for part 4 of How to Play the Gambler's Chest expansion for Kingdom Death Monster. And lots of other great stuff coming. All kinds of really fun stuff. We just recently published How to Play Distilled Solo, so be sure to check that out. And until next time, if you're bored online, bored offline.